Well, welcome everybody. We are excited to have Amy Oliver here to join us for Engendering Inclusivity for Multi-Language Programming in Observatories by Putting It First. So Amy, welcome and take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. You guys, I'm so excited to be here today because there's so much crossover. We talk about an observatory, right? But observatories have science centers, which are in and of themselves museums. And I will just tell you guys, so I've been going through a massive renovation of the Whipple Observatory Science Center in Amado, Arizona for about the last 3 years. And the pandemic notwithstanding, we decided to just charge forward. And this is a tiny science center, but that place hadn't been updated since like 1989. I was 4 when that science center opened, and it was on the day I started working there as the day that it opened, with some minor adjustments, very, very minor adjustments. And so we're going to talk about that today and about that place as a case study for how we can actually start putting multi-language programming first. And I'll explain that context to you in just a minute here. So we focused pretty heavily on Spanish, but you can really take this approach with any language that you need in your own community. So here is the problem. Right? What you are looking at right now is a pretty current view of Amado, Arizona. Actually, if you look just to the left of that word bubble, you're looking at the San Cayetano mountain range, and I live just, oh, do I have a little, I'll show you guys where I live. If I can get myself a little annotator. Will it let me annotate? Spotlight. So I live about right there. Oops. Okay, so I live about right here. Okay, so you can't really see houses there. That's because there isn't a lot going on in this area. Okay, so not a ton of people. Santa Cruz County only has about 69,000 people as of today. But this observatory opened in 1968 in a rural Spanish first community. But as you can see on the slide, for 50 plus years produced nearly all of its materials and programming in English only. So you're probably sitting out there thinking, why? Why would an institution do that? And that's because that was the standard we all thought was appropriate 55 years ago. So this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. When I arrived at the observatory as a full-time employee for the first time in 2018, I very quickly noticed that everyone who came to the observatory were wealthy white individuals in neighboring communities 20-25 minutes away. They were not serving the communities of the schools that are 95% Hispanic, 20 minutes to the south or in the immediate area surrounding the observatory. So that's where that self-fulfilling prophecy comes in. If we only create the materials in a language that is not known to the surrounding community, they are not going to come to the facility. So we really have to pay attention to what the needs of the community are. And it gets worse. So what you're looking at was built 15 years ago-ish. It looks kind of like a spaceship hub, but that's actually a border patrol checkpoint. And for those of you unfamiliar with a border patrol checkpoint, those are usually positioned within about 1.5 to 2 miles of the border. But in southern Arizona, they are actually positioned in a way that cuts off Santa Cruz County, Cochise County, and most of Yuma County, Arizona from the rest of Arizona. This particular one is situated about 35 miles north of the Mexican border. And so south of that, all of these kids and families are trapped and don't really have access to the resources that are on the other side of the border patrol checkpoint, because if you're not a citizen, it's really difficult to cross that border patrol checkpoint. So Whipple Observatory is about right here, if you can see where I'm putting that little red dot, right? So out into the desert, but just on the other side of that Border Patrol checkpoint, which is really unfortunate for the community in that way. So that added to the complications. There was previously a part-time education staff person at that science center who did bring in school groups from deep southern Arizona, Nogales, Arizona, right along the border. But once that Border Patrol checkpoint went in, that position was dissolved because you just couldn't bring the schools there anymore. It became very difficult to do that. So for those of you who don't read Spanish, okay, this is where I start to make it a little uncomfortable for everybody. So this is, if it's not your first language, you might find this title a little uncomfortable, and that is the point. Right? That when we are encountering a language that isn't our first, it feels weird. But preguntamos si está bien, right? We needed answers. We started to ask questions. Okay, so we needed to talk to the community. And so in 2018, I started asking questions of my neighbors, right? I live south of the Border Patrol checkpoint. So I started asking the community, and I sent some other individuals out to ask the community, did they know what Whipple Observatory was? Did they know where it was? Did they ever visit? And most of them said they didn't know they were allowed to go there. And that's because there were never services pointed in their direction, letting them know that they were welcome to come to the facility. So after that, one of the primary things that happened is I went back and I surveyed all of the volunteers, and I talked to all of the staff, and we decided to start creating programming and materials that were in Spanish first. And that means we were not creating them in English and then translating to Spanish, but instead we were creating them in Spanish either on their own and deliberately targeted to the Spanish-speaking community, or we were developing them completely alongside each other. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a second. Although I actually want to point out right here too that when I surveyed our volunteers and our staff, we had an overwhelming conscious and excited desire to learn Spanish. So I asked at the time that I was starting to talk to everyone, if I offered you classes in Spanish as a part of your employment or volunteership, would you take them to make you a better communicator at our facility? And I think only 2 people said no out of about 65 people that I had to survey. So this was a really, truly conscious effort on the part of everybody. So one of the first things that I did was I actually reached out and started looking for a planetarium. So if you've ever visited a planetarium, you've probably sat in a real dome. Most people south of the Border Patrol checkpoint don't have access to that. The nearest one is about an hour and 20 minutes north of Amado, Arizona, so about 2 hours north of Nogales, beyond that Border Patrol checkpoint. So I created, I got hold of an in-kind donation of a mobile planetarium that we could put up in our facility. They're millions of dollars to construct. We couldn't do that. Also, I would need, Congress to approve me to modify that particular facility. It's on federal land. So we got this mobile dome, and we created Planetario Viajero del Observatorio Whipple, which is basically planetarium on wheels, planetarium on the move. Okay, so we created this program, and what we wanted to do was be able to go out to places that are far away and don't have equitable access. So this particular dome, this is what it looks like blown up. It's a star lab. It looks like a space bubble, but it was created so that we could go into Spanish-speaking classrooms primarily, and everything was presented in Spanish. So we didn't even write things in English first. Everything was done that way. All the hands-on activities, the dome shows that we selected were all in Spanish, live science presentations, all to be presented in Spanish. We only got to test this program, and we received it in December of 2019, and then, or November of 2019, and then we only got to test it a little bit, and then the pandemic showed up. But it was a really popular idea, and schools appreciated it, teachers appreciated it. So this is something that once we can go back out into the community again, we will be doing this on a regular basis. We've also figured out how to do it inside our very tiny facility. So we're excited about that. We also created a program, no longer at the Whipple Observatory or at Smithsonian. It has come with me since I've departed as a full-time employee, and it actually came with me to NASA JPL Solar System Ambassadors. But Hablemos de Estrella is a program that is focused on elevating Hispanic and Latinx scientists, and particularly female scientists. And it is run completely in Spanish. So it is Spanish language, Spanish subtitles targeted to Spanish-speaking audiences. And the goal is really to create that inclusivity for them, to let them know that we are targeting those programs to them. So later we do add English subtitles, but the point is to create that program, right? There is another program that is in English that is then translated to Spanish, and so we want to create that equitable footing. And it has been incredibly popular, especially it was created during the pandemic. And so it has been a solely virtual experience. My co-creator is not here today, Jaime Cordova, but he's the primary host of this program, and he could tell you so many wonderful things about the experience that we have had from the Spanish-speaking perspective, that we attract more people from Spain and Chile and Argentina than really anywhere else, because we are providing a service that has been sorely lacking. And so we've been really excited about that. But what this also prompted us to do, Jaime and I are collaborating again, so I still work part-time for Whipple Observatory. And in our exhibits renovation, of course, the panels, because we have such limited space, are in English, but we are developing an app that goes with the panels. And so we are developing content that expands upon the panels and also recreates them in the app side by side, that is in English and in Spanish. And so that has been really exciting, that we are finding those ways and finding that ingenuity to create that. Why that is important, and I promised you I would talk about why are we doing that? Why is translation not enough? And that is because the learning experience and the context is different. So when you speak Spanish and you are from a different culture, right? Mexican culture is different than English-speaking American culture. And there is a difference there. And words don't mean the same things. There's not always a good direct translation. And so we want to teach the concept in the most meaningful way possible, in a way that somebody can truly understand it, instead of trying to climb over the hurdle of translation. And so we really have focused really heavily in creating this experience that is about meeting people where they truly are, rather than trying to put a Band-Aid on it. And that requires us to put in more work. It does, but the outcome is truly meaningful and beautiful. And we have had nothing but a positive experience and a positive reception to this change that we are trying to push on our own, this little two-man team, really trying to make this happen. So I jumped ahead on myself there, but Porque esta en espanol? Why do we do this in Spanish? And that is why, because we lose that meaning. We lose the conceptual and contextual meaning. So I'll tell you a little bit about Hablemos in particular. We started with 45 viewers in multiple countries. In January 2021, we had 678 views, a lot of them from Spain. And then I already told you that we've jumped forward, we continue to grow. And it's been a really wonderful learning experience for us as well, as educators, really communicating with the public in that way. We also have a paper out, Museum Scholars Theory and Practice. The entire edition is not out yet, But our paper was published so that we could share it with everyone. And we'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides and a link to the paper, but you can actually read all about our experience and the literature reviews that we did to come to the conclusion that this was the right way to move forward with the way that we treat multiple languages in museums or in observatories or any other cultural institution that works with the public. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Amy. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. I can let you speak, or you can certainly put questions into the chat.
I think, let me see if I can.
Yep, it's from Yara. So how was the response with the American community when you created this?
That is a really good question. So we did in the beginning have a number of questions about why are you creating this in Spanish? You know, why isn't this in English? I can't participate. And so, of course, there's always going to be that feeling of discomfort, right? Where we had to deal with that and talk to the audience and say, this is created for this other audience. It will be available in English later, right? And being very aware of and sensitive to the fact that you do create a little bit of exclusivity in that way by creating materials like that. So the Hablemos program specifically. But in terms of the other things that we have done, we have not had any questions or any negative reception. Everything has been really positive. Schools are really positive about it. You know, the kind of interesting and great thing about Arizona is that there are, 5 world-renowned observatories in Arizona. So if I can't meet their needs, well, there are 4 other observatories to do it. So we focus our efforts into the groups that are not getting services. And so there has been less resistance to that in our communities because we are serving that immediate community, and either the University of Arizona or Lowell Observatory or Kitt Peak can go out and handle everybody else.
Great. So another question, you mentioned the importance of developing Spanish content alongside English content. Can you speak more on this? And how did you accomplish this? And how do you coordinate having both materials floating around at once?
Right. So one of the most interesting things that we do is have a conversation together at the same time, where we are that theme and that idea, right? Because the biggest thing to think about in that way is that because there's so much different conceptual meaning and context, is that the material will never be identical, right? That's what a translation is. A translation provides you an identical material in 2 different languages, whereas the conceptual content, which is developed alongside each other, doesn't have to be identical content. It is meant to capture the same context and the same concept in the way that is best suited for the audience that is going to ingest that content. And so when we do that, right, we develop the theme together. We come up with the basics of here's the 10 bullet points that need to be captured in this conversation that we're about to have about, let's just say, black holes. And so we need to capture this concept. Now go do that, and then we switch. So since, everybody who's working on the content is dual language, I'm not very great at it. I'll be honest, I got a lot of learning to do in Spanish, but we switch the content, and then we make sure that all of the same concepts are there and that all of the same material is covered, but it doesn't have to be precisely the same language. And I think that that's really important to do because you have that opportunity to add whatever needs to be added that might be missing for context. was a really great question. Thank you.
It is. So Yara is following up asking, was this new approach hard to present and accepted by donors or board members?
It really wasn't. Right? I think the biggest question that they had was, how are you going to accomplish this? How are you going to make sure that it meets the needs of the community, and why? Right? So the why is always the big question that you're going to get from donors and board members and your boss. And so, you know, our chain of command at Whipple Observatory is a little strange because we have on-site management that needs to do buy-in, that are not affiliated with the science center, they're affiliated with the observatory. And then on top of that, you then have the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and Smithsonian who have to do buy-in. And then there are other people, you can't see me because my video is off, but flittered out throughout the Smithsonian that I needed to reach out to and also get buy-in or thoughts. And so there's a lot going on there, right? And then you have the internal community, and we don't have direct board members at our facility because of the way we are structured, but there are still people likened to board members who will look at materials. But the why is always the biggest question that you have to answer. Why do we need to do this? And for us, it was a really simple sell to look at all of these individuals and say 75% to 77% of our print, so within 15 miles each direction of the observatory, speak Spanish first or only. And all of our materials are in English. And so the huge question they had for us was they always wanted to grow, right? We're in the middle of nowhere. That place is in the middle of nowhere for all intents and purposes. So they wanted to go from 6,000 visitors a year to 12,000. And the answer to that is, well, then you have to be able to reach the community. There's enough people in the community to make that happen. But if you're not serving their needs, you can't make that happen. And so it was a really easy sell. So you always have to look for what is the why, and then what solves the why. So the why is always the problem that you're trying to solve, and then you have to provide the solution with that. And so that was really what I focused on in saying we need to start creating these materials like this.
Have you seen a shift to your visitors to your space outside of you actually going out to the community?
So we have been closed for the entirety of the pandemic. So I cannot answer that question at this time. However, what I can tell you is that I have seen an increase in the interest level in the facility. So the facility is still not open. Well, technically we probably could be open, but now we've torn our entire science center apart for the exhibit renovation, right? So we're still closed. But the interest level is there. And so I see more calls, emails, and questions from immediate zip codes than ever before. So I would say that went from, 5 a year to, 20 a week. And so that we know that we're doing the right things, and we know that we're starting to provide the right services. And since all of the programming has been virtual, that also has been a huge thing for us because we reach more people in places that can't get to us. So that's an important part of the ongoing strategy that we will probably keep forever, is that some of that programming will remain virtual so that we can reach people who just can't get there.
Right. Are you also providing all print materials, signage, and things like your website in Spanish? The person writing this is saying that they're struggling to find footing on where to start.
Right. So let me answer first signage and everything, right? So anything we make on site will, except for exhibit panels. Okay. So exhibit panels have the app, the phone app. And one of the important things we did, I didn't mention to you, is that I purchased borrowable, are y'all too young for what's it called? It's not an iPhone. It's Nicole, help me.
Flip phone?
No, no, it's like iPhone, but it's only for music. What are those called? iPods. Okay,
iPod.
so we bought a small number of borrowable iPods that will have the app on them. So if somebody does not have a phone to use in our facility, they can borrow it while they're there, to be able to access exhibit panels in Spanish with all of the additional content. But the app, when it is finished, will be accessible all the time from anywhere. So people will always have that. All of our anything we print on site, obviously we're not doing that now because we don't have people coming in, so we have no printed materials, but they will always be from now on in English and Spanish. So we've made that commitment that they'll be dual-sided or side-by-side in English and Spanish. We do not have control of our own website, so that's an ongoing negotiation since we are a multi-step down facility. We just don't have that control. But anything that we do create on our own is all dual language. And so I think the question for that is, how do you get started, right? So I think the biggest part of that is, you know, the encouragement I would give you is to at least start with translation. Because that's anywhere to start, right? And so if you have a volunteer or someone on your staff who can help you do that, at least to get started and see how that will impact your community and what the positive levels are and what the need are, that's a really good place to start trying that, and then go from there.
Do you utilize social media? And if so, any dual language happening there?
We do use social media. So again, with not having control of our own social media, so somebody else controls that for us. However, I can tell you, so outside of this exact context, I also do work for the National Optical and Infrared Laboratory. That's a really long name. It's called NOIR Lab. And all of their facilities do have dual language social media, so they actually have completely separate channels for their Spanish-speaking audience. As opposed to their regular audience. You can always, I have found great success myself in doing dual posting, where you have the English and the Spanish in the same post if you can. But if you can't, to have whatever you can do, because remember, we're all small staffs, right? I don't imagine there's anyone here who doesn't have 5 or 6 jobs in addition to their actual job, because that is how museums work. So you do what you can, right? So if you can do a dual post on Facebook where you put the English and the Spanish in the same post, that is amazing. And do that. And if you have the capacity to run 2 channels where they're identical to each other, but one is in English and one is in whatever other language you need, more power to you. But we don't all have 8 or 9 people running social media. Most of us have 1/10 of a person running social media. So keep in mind that a number of social media outlets have the translation capability. It's not great, right? So if you have to rely on that, that's still a starting point.
Okay. Any other questions for Amy? All right, Yara says, are you getting more children students in the community to study science with this big change?
Man, I like to think so. Okay, so, so the interesting thing is our closest high school, if you have not heard of this, is a Cambridge Method School. So even though it's a Title I school and is low on resources, Santa Cruz County puts everything that we have left. When all the bills are paid, we put everything we have into our kids. And I love that about this community so much because it's a small community, it's a rural, low-income community. So Cambridge Method means that these kids are rocking 400 level college coursework. while they're in the 9th grade. And they're doing that through their entire high school experience. So these kids are already truly heavily committed to bettering their futures. And that helps a lot because they are all interested. You don't meet a kid in Santa Cruz County that doesn't think a rocket is cool, which makes it really easy to do science in this community. But in general, I mean, I think it's all about reading the room. So it is not just about language. It is entirely about reading the room and knowing what's needed. And so we have definitely, as I said, had a lot more interest from the families and individuals living in this community, which is a big deal in a lot of ways. And so it's hard to judge that particular question and provide a really good answer in a place where most of the world's large observatories exist, because everybody loves them and loves science and wants to be near us all the time. So nobody's gonna walk in and say, I hate science, to your science center. It's not like I used to live in Utah. You would get that all the time. But that really doesn't happen here. So it's sort of insulated in that way. But I think in general, I can tell you I go all over the world, and I find that just reading the room and providing what is needed for someone to find the wonder in learning about whatever it is you're teaching, it doesn't matter what it is, provide them what they need, and they will find an in to be excited about it. And so it's really just reading the room, and that could be the language barrier, or it could be a learning barrier, or it could be my mom forced me to be at this library on a Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. and I'm 8 and I would rather be playing street hockey. Read your room. I've had kids look at me and tell me that science is the stupidest thing they've ever encountered in their life, and then 3 hours later when we're done with summer camp, want to be a scientist. And I just had a kid get accepted to a chemical engineering program who once told me that I was stupid and science was stupid, and he kicked me and ran away. Okay, so that's what it's about, is truly just figuring out what the need is. So in this case, language is the need. My cat has joined the call. And yawned at me. You're rude. I'm interesting. Okay. Just figure out what that is. So if language is the barrier, you will make a difference. You might never know that you made a difference, but you will make one.
Sir. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, you have Amy's contact there on the screen. Amy, if you would love to, we would love to share this presentation with you, with everybody. It has been recorded, so we will get it up on our YouTube site in the coming weeks. But I am going to put the link to the next session block, which starts at 3:45, in the chat. Muted myself. Good luck on your healing from your surgery. But we much appreciated. Definitely a lot to think about, and hopefully people can implement some of this in their own and move forward. So.
Yes, and please, to everyone who's here today, don't be shy. My email is right there. I mean, Jaime would be really confused if you email him. Just tell him why. You're more than welcome to email him. I'm sure he'll love to answer questions for you. But you can definitely email me. That's the aoliver@nrao.edu. Don't be shy. Please feel free to email me if you have questions, or you need help, or you need to figure out where to get resources, or figure out how to talk to your board or your donors about why you need to do these things. And we will make the presentation slides and the paper available to you.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good one.